Okay, welcome back to the basement. When we left you last week, we took the guides off one of my 9-foot rods that I wanted to replace with ceramic guides. Now, I wanted to do 2 this winter. Well, I couldn't wait a week, so I did 1 already. So I replaced the guides on the 9-foot rod. Like we talked last week, they were wire guides. I went with more braid-friendly guides. My guides, I got them from Wavin in Spain. They're from a company called Carp. They're a little lighter ceramic guide on it. And, well, what I was looking for was SIC, which a silica carbide. A lot of other guides are ceramic. A lot of other inserts aren't braid-friendly. So, the only thing I did different when I rebuilt this one is I put a hook keeper, which I rarely see on any kind of carp rod. So that was a piece of cake. And then I also put a line clip. Now the line clip, they usually put it down here where I got my hook keeper, but I decided to put it further up because all the other name brand line clips that are movable, I always put them approximately where this one is anyway. So all I did is I took an old piece of blank and I sliced the section off the blank and I cut a little piece like this. Then I put it on and I tied the last half of it, and there you go, I got a line clip. Now this one ain't movable, and if I ever want a movable one in the future, I can put one on. That's all there's to it. So I got one done. So let's do the other one. We went through stripping it last week. Don't worry about cleaning it off so perfectly because a lot of that leftover epoxy from the original guides is going to be right underneath the epoxy and the thread of the new guide. Now speaking of guides, when the guides come in, they have a blunt end on the ends. So what I'm trying to show here is that this guide foot, they have a blunt end on them. And what I have to do is file that down to a slight taper, so when I start wrapping my thread, it makes a smooth transition onto the guide foot. Otherwise, my thread will go onto the guide foot and it'll naturally bounce off until I got a big lump of thread. And now, well, nothing is in line anymore. And hey, you can still do it, but it's not going to be pretty. So I filed all of them. Everybody knows how to file, but I'll do this one real quick. We might fast forward it, but you're going to get the gist of what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I'm taking a little bit off the sides too. The bigger the guide, the bigger the foot, the more of a taper you got to put on it to make that smooth transition. Got maybe a millimeter of a blunt end. I want to get that just before it files to a point. I don't really want a really sharp point because now that can damage the rod. So now you can see how I filed it down to a taper. And like I said, I'm going to start wrapping about 1/8 of an inch away from it. And when I get up to the guide, it'll make a smooth transition. I'm there. So now I'm going to feel it to make sure I haven't got any burrs. It's got to be really smooth, because if you got burrs on there, when you're putting your thread on and you're adjusting your thread and pushing it into the right position, if you got a burr on there, it's going to nick your thread, it's going to fray it, and it's going to look like a chunk of sand once you put your finish coating on it. So I don't mind taking a little stone and just smoothing it off, just to make sure there's no burrs on the bottom too. And here's another thing we should talk about. The guides, they don't always come in where the guide feet sit flat. You got to make sure they're sitting flat If they're curling up, well, now you've got too much of a height to get onto the guide. If the tips are pointing down, you can damage your rod because the tip might dig into your blank. I did adjust this one already. I'll give it a little file. There you go. No burrs. Everything feels good. Okay, I didn't do this one yet. There you go. Nice and smooth. Ready to go onto the blank. Now you'll notice my wrapping box I got here. This is just to keep the rod level while I'm tying the guide on. Now you'll notice I've taken my thread and I slid it under the box. I come back up under the box and all I did was cut a little notch with my utility knife into the box. My thread goes into there and it's going to go onto my rod. And then for a little bit of tension, I had put a little felt, cut it off my insulating liners in my boots, and then I just put it over top, and then that'll give me just enough tension and it'll clean my thread as it's coming out. Because your thread, again, if you got any frays, a little bit of dust, especially in a dusty environment like this, the dust will get onto your wrap and your first coat of clear epoxy will really show it like a speck of sand. We can fix that. As you've noticed, my finished product, you don't see too many bumps. Now that's 3 coats of finish on there, so that's the difference. Okay, so let's put the guide on. You can use masking tape. Actually, I found this tape one day when I was fishing. Go figure. And it's perfect for what I'm looking for. So now what I'm looking for to do is I want to put it right back to where the old one was. You can see the old epoxy. You can see where my thread started. You can see where it ended. I can see where my thread started on that side. You can see where it ended. Now, luckily enough, these guides fit pretty close to the original footprint of the old guides. So I'm just going to go right back to where the old guides were. And if it don't quite line up, that's okay. Split the difference. And I won't tell anyone. There you go. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to tape that on there. There you go.
Oops. My bad.
Now to make sure that it's in the proper position, my reel here is going to be straight up. So I'm trying to keep everything up in the middle, and then my guide should follow through straight up from that. Now after I wrap them, if I wrap them light enough, I can maneuver that guide a little bit to get it perfectly straight. So after I do tie that guide, now I can put a reel on here, and now I can make the guide go in line with that reel perfectly straight. Straight up, straight down. You can look it over, you can adjust it a bit, and then once you put the epoxy on, it's locked in. It's going to stay. Let's tie one on. So now with my little homemade jig, I'm trying to keep the thread to go straight onto my guide. So since I'm going to start here, I'm going to bring it up a little bit. There you go. That's where I should be to start. Now to start, I'm going to anchor my thread up at this end on the other side of the guide. And now I'm going to lightly, don't have to pull hard. I'm going to lightly wrap it around the blank. And this is where I want to start right here. Now where you want to start, don't pull too hard on your thread because it'll make it really hard on you. What you want to do is try to keep it as light as you could. Until you can crisscross that thread. So you see I'm crisscrossing that thread now. Now I can start wrapping. And again, you don't have to go tight. So there you go. Now I'm in line. Now I've got the proper tension on here. Now this thread here that I started with, I'm going to cut that off eventually. What I want to do is get a few more wraps on it. And again, if you wrap too tight, you can see underneath it. You can see that thread, but don't worry too much about that. Once you've got your 3 coats of epoxy on there, you won't see it. So now I'm unwrapping it. But now I want to get another 4 or 5 wraps on it while it's pointing this way. And that should lock it in completely. Now, if you notice, I got a little bit of a gap. That's no big deal. All you got to do is push that over a little bit, push it over a little bit, push it over a little bit. There you go. And then, don't worry too much about it, because once you're completely done, you can push at this end also. So, here's my couple wraps over top of that thread. Okay, now I can get rid of that thread, because now it's locked in. It's underneath them wraps. Now this thread, don't throw it away. You're going to need it when it comes to finishing off your wrap. So I'm going to put that there. So now I can start wrapping up. I'm in no hurry. Okay, and here is where I'm getting ready to go over top my guide foot. Now, it still is a little bit blunted, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a gap in my thread, and I'm going to wrap a little bit ahead of it. You see how it keeps trying to jump off? Well, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and wrap away from the point, put a couple wraps on there. Okay, now I'm going to push them wraps down. There you go. Push it down in the back. Try to make it all straight. There you go. So since I was left with a little bit more of a gap there, it means I've got to push my thread over a little more to straighten it out from where I was. There you go. That looks pretty good. There you go, she's wrapping. Now you can see there's still a little bit of gaps there, but don't worry about it, because now after I'm all wrapped, I can rub a little piece of wood or a little piece of brush handle on there, and it'll all fall into place. So now I can get rid of this piece of tape, because now I've got a good grip on that guide. Now you'll notice here I crisscrossed, backtrack, go back again, there you go. So now at this point I've got half the guide foot done. I'm going to go with maybe another half a dozen wraps, and then that's where I'm going to put my little thread in there to tie it off and pull it back through. So I usually leave about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch. Okay. Now what I want to do is take this thread, double it, make a loop, shove it underneath this thread. That's it. Now I keep wrapping. You'll notice the loop on that side and the 2 loose ends on that side. Now I'm going to finish wrapping it. Then I'm going to cut this thread, put it through that loop, and pull it through. And that locks everything in. Now you can see where my old thread finished. So I'm going to go up to there. I You still have the marks from the old guides, but once I put my own epoxy on there, it's going to mask all of that. You're not even going to see it. So that should be good enough right there. So now what I'm going to do, I got to cut this one off. Now before I do that, I've got to lock this wrap so it doesn't all unravel when I cut it. So what I usually do is I put my finger underneath and I push it against my wraps. Now I can cut this off. I usually leave myself a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 inches, 3 to 4 inches. I take this in, I put it through the loop of that line that I put underneath, okay? So now I'm going to take these 2 ends, pull it through. Now, okay, now the line has gone through, but there's an open space in between them guides from the edge of the guide to the blank. There's a loose space there. Now, if you leave your line like that, it could get loose. So what I've learned through the years is that my thread is squeezing on top of the guide foot, but it's loose here. So all I gotta do is take this thread, there you go. I pulled it off the side of the guide. Now it's in the center of the guide. I can give it a little bit of a tug. Now everything's locked in. So now I'll straighten everything out with my fingernail. Straighten out here. Give it a little bit of a rub. And now I leave this long until I've done my epoxy. And then I nip it clean, because if I nip it right now, I could leave a couple little pieces of frayed thread. And like I said, it'll come out like a big chunk of sand. So like I said, I'll leave that there for now. And now we'll tie the other side of the guide. Now I'm going to make it go through underneath. Now that thread is locked in. I can get rid of it now. Okay, now I'm getting close to my foot. Okay, now I'm almost there, but it's going to jump off. So now, like I said, don't worry about trying to wrap right on the end. See how it's jumping off? Don't worry too much about that right now. Try to get your wrap going somewhere above that, and then you'll be able to just slide them down. Well, so now I'm at a point where I should be putting, I'll call this my fish thread, and that's for fishing the line out. That's for fishing the thread I'm wrapping with. So that's it. Yeah, that should do me. So again, I put some pressure on the back of the wrap. That way it's not going to unravel. I'm going to allow myself a little bit of room here. I'm going to cut the original thread that I'm wrapping with. Go through the loop. Pull her tight. Now grab this end with the loop, pull your line through. And like I was saying, now you want to go up onto the center of your guide foot. There it is, right there. That locks everything in. Straighten everything out with your thumbnail, popsicle stick, whatever it takes. You can push this in. There you go. I like it. Then I usually take these two threads. I wrap them with a little bit of tape. Wrap that one there. Wrap that one there. There you go. So now I'm going to go ahead and epoxy it once I'm done my rod. And once the first coat of epoxy is dried, this thread gets really stiff, gets rock hard. And then I'm just going to take a set of nail clippers and I'm going to cut it off flush. It's going to leave a little bit of a bump. I'm going to push that down with my thumbnail, with a popsicle stick, whatever's practical. Don't worry about too much about your finish with the first coat, because like I said, you're going to get bubbles. You're going to get little bumps. I can see a little bit of dust here. See, it's even coming off my fingers. That's what happens when I make boilies and everything else in here. Your first coat is going to have a bit of bumps. Don't worry about it, flatten them out. Your second coat of clear finish epoxy will be thicker. It'll hide most of them bumps. If there's any left, you can flatten them out a little bit. Don't try filing them, because if you fray your thread, you're going to have even more problems. And the third coat should give you that kind of finish. Now, it's not perfect. I can see bumps. I can see a little bit of imperfections, but I'll tell you, when I'm holding that blank and I'm talking to my buddy 10 feet away, he ain't going to see it. Now, it's looking to me like it's going that way a little bit. So all you got to do is very lightly give it a little bit of a push. So now that looks centered, that a little bit more. There you go. Now, just to be sure, I'm going to put a reel on there. So the reel is straight. How's the guide look like at your end, Gerald?
Perfect.
Okay. So now I'm good with that guide. So now I can put that aside. And when it's time to put my clear finish on them, I'll take it back out, put it on my rotator box, put my first coat of epoxy on it. Now we're going to put the little hook keeper on. And it comes with the guide feet already ground down to a nice taper. So all I got to do is tape one side, wrap the other side. That'll be done. And I'm going to have that in line with the bottom of my blank. And there again, with my wrap, you'll notice I started right next to the guide foot. I don't need any strength there, or I'm not too worried about the transition. It's on. For my tie off. There you go. That's one side. Now the other side. There's my hook keeper. Now on to the line clip. I want to put this on the side. Okay, I'm approximately right there. Okay, I got it pointing down and I want to put it on the side. So again, I filed the foot of that also to make a taper for when I start wrapping my line. That should do it. Lock it in with your finger underneath. Pull your loop through. Lock it in. There we go. So now I just put a line clip on. And I put a hook keeper. Now I would call that tailor-made. Okay, now I got my tip section on. And you'll notice I kept the old guide, the old tip top on. Now the purpose for that is now this tip top is telling me how to orientate the rest of my guides in line with the tip top. These guides are set factory made onto the backbone, so I want to stay in line where the backbone was. Once I got all my guides on, I'm going to get rid of that tip top and I'm going to put my ceramic tip top on there. Let's wrap the tip section. Notice these double foot guides, they have a double support on one side and a single support on the other side. Now the rule usually is the double support towards the butt of the rod and a single support towards the tip. So there we go. All that's left now is to put the clear coat on it and then cut my little threads off after the first coat, and then I'll put 2 more coats of clear epoxy on top of that, and it'll come out just like this. Really looking forward to getting these low rods back out. Okay, cut. I just ruined it, see?